I am so glad you're joining us for this episode of the Leadership in Aviation podcast. And I have a guest that I have been dying to have on for a long time. My friend from the FAA Women in Advisory Board, Dana Donati. Dana, when I met her, was heading up Lift Academy, which was feeding students into Republic Airways, if I remember correctly, and then got tapped on the shoulder to lead a new initiative from United Airlines called United Aviate Academy. And we are going to talk about all sorts of things having to do with her leadership in a brand new endeavor. Dana, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks for asking me to be a part of this.
I'm actually glad that we delayed a little while and that we get to talk about this new adventure. And I think it triggered from some initiatives that United had and a big press release that they put out about their intentions to have more diversity, more women, more people of color on their flight decks. Can you tell me a little bit about how this came to be? I'm fascinated by the history of this.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the work that we did on the board just recognized that there's a problem. The numbers haven't changed in decades. And in order to ensure that we have a firm, workforce for our future aviation, we need to look outside of the box. We need to reach into communities that potentially never thought that they had access to aviation.
And so how are you doing that at United Aviate Academy? And tell me a little bit about how many pilots you're training right now. It's pretty significant.
Yeah, we as of today, we have over 120 students, and we started December 6th of 2021. So we're just a couple months in, we have over 120 students, and our goal is to recruit 500 students a year over the next 10 years. So, it's not something that we're doing by ourselves. It's collaboration in the industry. We are partnering with nonprofit organizations, with other entities to ensure that we're reaching out into communities.
Awesome. And so when you were tapped on the shoulder to do this, to join the team, to in fact build the team for this academy, what were some of the things that you were looking for in your leadership team?
That's a great question. It's through years of working with several people that I think when I, started working with the United team on finding the right team for United Aviate Academy, it was looking for individuals who were passionate about what we're doing and saw a purpose in this. I work with an awesome team where they show up every day wanting the best for the students, and we're truly all here to make each student successful. We have to have those difficult talks with students who might not be putting in the work, but our goal is to make sure that we're giving the students every resource for them to succeed. And, that's through collaboration, that's through empathy. It's really working together as a team. We come to the table and discuss everything as a group because everybody's background brings in a different experience. And I think that that's really what I love about the team is that we all come from different sections of aviation. And when you start to hear opinions and try to incorporate them into the decision, we're ultimately finding the best outcome for the student or changing a process to help students. And it's just really great to collaborate with my team.
I love that. One of the words that I would associate with that is alignment. And I think that that's something that you and I experienced on this board that was more diverse than it looks like when you look at everyone's pictures, but the different experience that everyone brought to this board from an educational or a flight training standpoint, or museums and universities to business owners or business leaders to military personnel and airline pilots, the experience that we all brought to the table was really compelling. It triggered a number of heated discussions, I would probably have to admit candidly. But I think that ultimately we ended up aligned around a single purpose, which for those listeners who don't know was to look at why there are so few women in aviation and aerospace and address what industry, the FAA, the Department of Transportation and Congress can do to ensure that we have enough pilots, mechanics, airline and airport personnel, air traffic controllers, and people involved in administration for the future generations of American aviation. And so as we were looking at that, we became aligned around a single purpose, which was making aviation better for everyone. And I think when we have that alignment, some of the other political things fall to the wayside. But if we gather everyone's experience, it becomes so valuable. And it sounds like you're taking some of those same techniques to your team.
Absolutely. And I do enjoy those hard conversations that, we had with each other on the board, but then also, the ones that I have at work with my team, because it's all about perspective. Sometimes we're not looking at all perspectives when we're making a decision. So some of the discussions on the board were about everybody's perspective and why, a change is needed or why a change through a different direction is better. Just because the different perspectives help make the best decisions.
I love that. I know from talking to other members of your team that you're achieving those representation goals, those breadth of representation goals in your training and in the students that you've accepted. You are definitely not white male dominated by any stretch of the imagination. That's the minority of enrollees in your school right now, or your academy right now. And I'm wondering what you see as different about that, because you've been in a scenario where you had mostly young men in your training, or mostly Caucasians in your training. And tell me a little bit about how different that feels to you right now.
Sure. What I see here at United Aviation Academy is the camaraderie between the students, that nobody is afraid or shy to speak up. When I went through training, I was one of two girls in my classes in college, and then either the only girl or maybe one of a few girls in initial training and captain upgrade. And, sometimes in those settings, it was like, okay, I'm not going to ask that question because I don't want to sound stupid. Or I will ask one person during the break or after class just to see if, I understood this properly. That's not what I see here. I see people raising their hand and speaking up, and that support that they're giving each other to speak up. It's just amazing to see that. I don't see people, kind of sitting in the back of the classroom. It's really that everybody is front and center, they're present, and they're wanting to learn and they're wanting to support each other. My favorite days are when somebody solos or somebody accomplishes a check ride, and in our lobby, it looks like a parade. I mean, people are playing music, people have, different like hats on, and like little captain hats and everything. And they're walking through the lobby and everybody's cheering them on. It's such a celebration because they're all here for each other.
I love that. I kind of want to be there for one of those. I might have to stop by, take you up on your offer for a tour.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I also wonder if you could put your crystal ball on 10 years from now, what you think that kind of culture that you've been able to develop there could translate into the ranks of United pilots 10 years from now.
I mean, I think 10 years from now, it's going to be a different flight deck. It's going to be a different presence at the airport. The passengers are going to see more people like them. And the goal too is for our students, as they move forward, they help those behind them. So it's building out that camaraderie and building out that support so we have a bigger reach. But I truly see, the look of the flight deck changing over the next 10 years. Hopefully we can change that. We can move that needle. Like I said in the beginning, part of our initiative on the board was to actually go back into time and say, why haven't these numbers changed? What our past look like and what we can do to change the future. And I truly think that what we're doing here at United Aviation Academy will move that needle.
I think so too. I think it's going to be really powerful to see as these young people, or not so young people that you have in your program right now, because you have some diversity of age as well. what they look like as role models and advocates for the people who are coming behind them, having been trained in this environment where there's a greater level of acceptance and perhaps professional celebration instead of competition, that's really fueling a collaborative energy in your program. I think that's really exciting. Dana, on the board that we served on, you were the chair of the training and recruitment subcommittee, and you were really diving into some financial issues and some recruitment or outreach issues that we weren't looking at, and maybe some paths into certain aviation occupations that hadn't been thought of or really hadn't been explored very much before. Could you talk a little bit about the recommendations that came out of that we're making to the FAA and to Congress and to industry so that we can pull more people into aviation to begin with?
Absolutely. When we first started our discussions, we broke out into subcommittees. I think, we didn't know where to start, right? So like training and recruitment is so big. It's literally from the ages of, 1 all the way up to about 18 to 25 years old, just depending on when they're going to take that next step into the career. And so I feel like we started off with curriculum, and it's like, okay, let's identify, what's available out there, and how can we recommend better or improved, curriculum. And what we started to identify is that there's such a disconnect from the Department of Education to post-secondary school. And there's a disconnect between guidance counselors and students, and so what can we identify as a bridge for students in high school and as young as 5th grade, because we did identify that 5th grade is the age where students start to either self-select careers or identify with a career. We looked at different states to see what they were doing, and so we called the state of Georgia, Wisconsin, North Dakota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, just to ask questions, and Indiana was also instrumental in our research. And Department of Workforce Development, they are creating positions in the Department of Education where they can have these career coaches work with high schoolers. So they've identified a gap between guidance counselors and post-secondary education, that they're identifying career counselors to work with guidance counselors to say, hey, there's a lot of positions open within the state, which we thought was really great. But then what we also identified is that the state jobs aren't as the same as federal jobs. So, a lot of the certifications under the FAA are federal certifications. So these certifications truly aren't being identified as jobs at the state level. Additionally, career technology education, which is really big across all 50 states, students can do their high school curriculum, but then they can also work towards their career. So auto mechanic, cosmetology, they can start that education in high school and get certified by the time they graduate high school. Not every state is providing aviation certifications. So most states can provide private pilot certification, airframe certification, power plant certification, repairman certification. So there are some gaps in the system where jobs and careers aren't really being identified and then promoted to students. So that lack of awareness is happening. And we actually went into like every state's website, and only 26 out of the 50 states have approved FAA certifications on their industry recognized list. So these are small wins. It's low-hanging fruit where, if every state identifies what certifications they can add to that list, then there's an opportunity for students, for the CTE program to get the funding to educate the students. Title IV financial aid, that's another, area that needs attention, that, and I use this as an example, in one of our meetings, that, I can go to the same school as an aviation student. I can go to the same school as somebody who's going to get a degree in psychology, and we're going to still pay the same credit hour to that college. So we're going to walk away with the same tuition cost, but an aviation student could pay an additional $70, $80, $100,000 on top of their tuition because they have to pay for flight hours. And then, is that actually pulling people away from the career because they can't get the additional funds to pay for this education. So it's that barrier that they might be interested in it. We maybe did a good job of creating that awareness and outreach, but if they can't afford the training, then they're not going to enter the career. So I feel like in our subcommittee, there was just so much information that we were able to discover and uncover. And I don't know how many recommendations specifically we submitted, but it was quite a few. But a lot of it is collaboration between different entities of the government, and then even VA providing the GI Bill. There's opportunities for our veterans, but the path or the bridge to the civilian life isn't easy. So what can we do to pave that a little bit more? So everybody, those that want to come into the civilian side of aviation, they don't have to struggle.
I love that. And I will tell all of our listeners, yes, Dana's committee did come up with more recommendations than everyone else. I think she's a little bit of an overachiever with that, or, motivated her committee really well, which bodes well for the academy that she is heading right now. Dana, I want to ask you a little bit about your personal leadership development. So what are the things in your life that have made you the incredible leader that you are? What things have you purposefully developed in your life?
I think a good work ethic. I was faced with some challenges when I graduated high school that I had to pay for my own college, and I knew I wanted to be a pilot. So I had to look at my options and really decide the most cost-effective option, which for me was a community college at the time, but it still required me to work 3 jobs while taking on 15 to 18 credits and then flying full time. So I just feel like at a very, very early age, it was just put in the work, keep your head down, focus on your goal, and just stick with it. And so I think I was able to learn how to be self-motivated and determined in order to accomplish the goal that I set out to accomplish. And then honestly, through my career, I think I was faced with different challenges, not bad, just overall challenges that I had to overcome. And for instance, maternity leave, that was a really big challenge that I had to face. And it's funny, I mean, my first child was born in 2009, and it was like my airline was like, oh my gosh, like we don't have uniforms, and we don't have this and we don't have that. And I'm like, babies have been born for like thousands and thousands of years. This is not a new subject, new topic. So I kind of had to maneuver that by myself. I really didn't have that guidance. And so if anything, it taught me grit, that I don't want to give up on something, that just because something is not easy doesn't mean that you give up. And sometimes the harder it is, the more successful it is to achieve that goal.
Definitely rewarding. Those things that we don't have to work hard at or don't have to pay for, often we take for granted. And those things that we had to make a lot of sacrifices for, which it sounds like you've done, you really appreciate and cherish even more. As you're thinking about dropping nuggets of wisdom into these classes of students that you have, what are the 2 or 3 leadership quotes or nuggets that you leave with those students that might benefit our listeners, those who are leaders as they're directing younger people, and those who are just students who are listening to this, who really would love to hear wisdom from Dana Donati today? What are your nuggets of wisdom to depart today?
One thing I always tell my students, and I actually, tell my friends in my personal life, is comparison is the thief of joy. And I think it's very easy to get sucked into what other people are doing, what they look like, how they're doing it, and try to compare yourself to that. And all you're going to do is make yourself miserable, make yourself unhappy. And in the world of social media, it's very easy to look at all the good that's happening in other people's lives. And then when you compare yourself to that, you're going to feel so empty. So as my students are going through training, a lot of times they'll compare themselves like, this person accomplished this flight lesson, or they're 3 lessons ahead of me. And it's like, don't think that. Who cares what the other person is doing or where they're at? Look at what you're doing and how you're showing up every day, and what you're doing to correct yourself to make sure that you're a better version of yourself tomorrow. So definitely, comparison is a thief of joy is something that I always say to each and every one of my students. And then I think When it comes to, how my team shows up, or sometimes, the struggles that we face, whether it's external and internal. I love the "man in the arena" quote, and I'm not going to say it because I don't have it memorized right now. But it's very easy for people outside of this industry and outside of this organization to say harsh things, and it's really just focusing on the goal and what we're here to do, and how we have to show up every day supporting our students, and just not to pay attention to anybody. You're the man in the arena, and you're fighting the good fight. Don't worry about what everybody else has to say.
Yeah, it's so important that we don't judge people when we haven't stood in their shoes. And there's so many things to look at with that. And you and I know this so much from being in a pilot scenario where we're looking at a choice that someone made, and the split second that they had to make that choice in the air, and judging, well, I wouldn't have done that. Well, you don't know if you would have done that or not. And I remember listening to Tammy Jo Schultz, who served on the board with us as well, talking about the incredible distress that she was in when she was landing flight 1380, and when she talked about the decisions that she had to make. But the cockpit was filled with smoke at the time, and it was so loud in there that she and her co-pilot were using hand signals because they couldn't hear each other. I think we begin to judge things that maybe we shouldn't be. So it's good advice on both sides. You do the best you can with the decision-making skills that you have and the information that you have, and hope for the best, doing your best, and then refrain from judging other people, because you don't know all of the circumstances surrounding their decision or their actions. I think that's really solid advice. Well, Dana, thanks so much for being on the podcast with me today. I have loved getting to know you. How do people get involved with United Aviate Academy? If there's someone who's listening who wants to apply, how do they find that?
No, they can check out our website at unitedaviate.com.
And how often are you starting new classes?
Once a month. So usually it's the first Monday of the month we start a new class. The application process does take a few weeks to a few months. So just encourage, applicants, if they're interested in applying, get the application in, and then they'll be filtered through the different processes in the application process.
And now I've learned to fly on a 1972 Cessna 172. Tell me a little bit about the equipment that you're using there, because this might be a compelling reason for people to be signing up for your academy.
Oh, the aircraft is really, really neat. It is an SR, it's a Cirrus SR-20, and it has, a side stick to it, and the G1000 equipment, and it's just a very advanced aircraft, and we're just very fortunate to be flying the Cirrus aircraft.
Amazing. Dana, thanks again so much for being here today. I appreciate you more than I can say.
Thank you, Renee. I appreciate you too.